Victoria Hayes sat in her high-rise office in Manhattan, the skyline stretching out before her like a glittering sea of opportunity. The soft hum of conversations filled the air as her team celebrated their latest triumph, a major deal that would send ripples through the financial world. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a mixture of excitement and relief. After weeks of intense negotiations, they had finally secured the investment that would not only benefit their firm but also solidify Victoria's reputation as a formidable player in the industry. "Cheers to Victoria!" shouted Marcus, her ever-enthusiastic junior analyst, raising his glass of champagne high. The others followed suit, laughter ringing out as they clinked glasses in her honor. "Without your strategic vision, we wouldn't be here," added Lisa, her right-hand woman, a smile lighting up her face. Victoria felt a swell of pride. She had worked hard to earn their respect and admiration. "Thank you, everyone," she replied, her voice steady. "This was a team effort, and I couldn't have done it without all of you. Now, let's keep pushing forward. We have more deals to close." As the celebration continued, Victoria's mind occasionally drifted. The office buzzed with energy, but she felt a subtle restlessness creeping in. She had poured her heart and soul into her career, yet a part of her longed for something more, something she couldn't quite define. However, she pushed those thoughts aside. Focus was key in her world. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city, Victoria packed her briefcase. The energy in the office had begun to wane as colleagues filtered out, eager to enjoy the evening. She glanced at her watch. It was time to head home. Her phone buzzed, breaking her reverie. The caller ID showed it was the building manager of her apartment complex. "Victoria, there's been a fire at one of the buildings nearby. We're evacuating residents, and I thought you should know." The manager's voice crackled through the line, laced with urgency. "Is everyone okay?" Victoria asked, her heart racing. "It's hard to say. Firefighters are on the scene now, but I urge you to stay clear of the area," he advised. "Thank you for letting me know," she replied, her mind racing. There was a sense of duty that surged within her. She needed to help, to do something. Without another thought, Victoria grabbed her coat and rushed out of the office, the weight of her day forgotten. The streets of Manhattan were alive with the sounds of evening traffic and distant sirens. As she approached the apartment building engulfed in flames, the scene was chaotic. Firefighters battled the blaze, their hoses spraying torrents of water against the inferno. A crowd had gathered, faces illuminated by the flickering orange glow, their expressions a mix of fear and concern. "Stay back. We need space," a firefighter shouted, directing people away from the danger zone. Victoria's heart raced as she spotted an elderly man standing at the edge, his face pale and eyes wide with panic. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, rushing to him. "My friend Samuel is still inside." "I can't leave him," he exclaimed, desperation etched in his voice. "Where is he?" "I'll help," Victoria replied, her determination surging. Before he could answer, another firefighter rushed past them. "We have to evacuate this area. It's too dangerous." Ignoring the warning, Victoria glanced back at the building, the flames licking hungrily at the windows. She clenched her fists, her mind made up. "I can't stand by and do nothing," she said to herself. With a deep breath, she pushed through the chaos, her instincts guiding her. The heat enveloped her as she stepped inside the building, the smoke swirling around her like a thick, suffocating blanket. Coughing, she pressed onward, the sound of crackling flames echoing off the walls. "Samuel!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. The acrid smell of smoke filled her lungs, but she pushed through, driven by a fierce determination. Suddenly, she heard a faint voice calling from further down the hallway. "Help! I'm trapped." Without hesitation, Victoria followed the sound, her heart pounding as she navigated through the darkened corridor. She stumbled upon a door slightly ajar, smoke billowing out. "Is anyone in there?" she yelled, her throat burning. "Yes. I can't get out," came the reply, panic lacing the voice. Victoria shoved the door open, the heat intensifying as she stepped inside. There, slumped against the wall, was Samuel Mitchell, an elderly man with gray hair and a look of sheer terror in his eyes. "Samuel," she cried, rushing to his side. "We need to get you out of here." He looked up, eyes wide with relief and disbelief. "Victoria? You came for me?" "Of course I did. Let's go," she urged, wrapping an arm around his frail shoulders as she helped him to his feet. Together, they stumbled toward the door, the smoke thickening around them. Just as they reached the threshold, a loud crash echoed through the building, sending debris crashing to the ground. Victoria instinctively shielded Samuel with her body, her heart racing as the flames roared behind them. "Stay close," she instructed, leading him through the smoke, her vision blurred but her determination unwavering. They emerged into the cool night air, the chaos outside a stark contrast to the inferno they had just escaped. Victoria felt a wave of relief wash over her as she guided Samuel to safety. "Thank you," he gasped, his voice shaky. "Just doing what anyone would do," she replied, though her heart still raced from the adrenaline. As they caught their breath, Victoria noticed something peculiar hanging on the wall of Samuel's apartment, a portrait. It was a beautiful painting, and as she took a step closer, a strange sense of familiarity washed over her. The woman in the painting bore an uncanny resemblance to herself, captured in a way that felt both intimate and haunting. "Who is this?" she asked, pointing to the portrait. Samuel's gaze followed hers, and a flicker of recognition crossed his features. "That's my grandson's first love. Her name was Victoria, too. He never quite got over her." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. What happened to him? Samuel's expression darkened, a sadness settling over him. "He disappeared years ago, under circumstances I still don't fully understand. He searched for her, but life took him in another direction." In that moment, Victoria's mind was flooded with memories of her own past, Daniel, the boy who had stolen her heart, and the mystery of his sudden departure. The connection sent chills down her spine, intertwining her fate with Samuel's in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. "Do you have any more information about him?" she pressed, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and apprehension. Samuel looked at her, a glimmer of recognition sparking in his eyes. Perhaps there's more to this story than I realized." As the sirens wailed in the distance and the chaos of the night began to settle, Victoria felt a stirring in her heart, a sense that this was just the beginning of a journey that would unravel the threads of her past, leading her to answers she had long sought. Victoria Hayes stood in the sterile, whitewashed hospital room, the faint scent of antiseptic hanging in the air. The rhythmic beeping of the machines punctuated the silence, creating a backdrop to her swirling thoughts. Samuel Mitchell lay on the bed, bandaged but stable, his eyes twinkling with a mix of gratitude and mischief. She had saved him from the inferno, and now, as she looked down at the elderly man, she felt a sense of connection that she couldn't quite place. "Victoria," he said, his voice gravelly yet warm, "you have no idea how grateful I am. You're a hero, you know that?" She smiled, feeling the weight of her success in the office earlier that day slip away. "I just did what anyone would have done," she replied, trying to downplay her actions. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been through a bonfire, but I'll survive. Thanks to you." Samuel's lips curled into a smile, and then he shifted slightly, wincing at the pain. "That fire, it was like a nightmare. But then you appeared, like a guardian angel." Victoria felt a flutter in her chest. "I was just in the right place at the right time," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you remember how it started?" Samuel's gaze turned distant, as if he were sifting through the ashes of his memory. "It's all a blur, really. One moment I was in my chair, reading, and the next," he paused, his voice faltering. "It was chaos. But you were my light in that darkness." The old man's words resonated with Victoria, stirring something deep within her. She had always been the one to take charge, to face challenges head-on, but this was different. There was a vulnerability in Samuel that made her want to protect him, to hear his story. "What were you reading?" she asked, hoping to divert his mind from the trauma. "Ah, a little something by Hemingway," he said with a twinkle in his eye. "You ever read him?" The way he writes about love and loss, it's hauntingly beautiful. Not really my style, Victoria admitted. I'm more into financial reports and market analysis. She chuckled lightly, but Samuel's expression turned serious. Life is more than numbers, dear. It's about the connections we make, the people we cherish. You remind me of someone I once knew, a young woman with a heart as big as yours. Victoria felt a strange mix of curiosity and apprehension. Who was she? Samuel's eyes seemed to glisten with memories. Her name was, well, it doesn't matter. She was a bright star, much like you. She had a love once, one that shaped her life in unimaginable ways. Do you believe in fate? Victoria asked, leaning forward, intrigued by his words. Fate? Oh yes. I think it weaves the threads of our lives together, sometimes in ways we don't even realize until it's too late. He paused, his gaze piercing through her. You've got a story of your own, don't you? Victoria hesitated, her thoughts drifting back to Daniel, the boy she had loved so fiercely. I used to, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. But it feels like a lifetime ago. Do you miss him? Samuel asked, his voice gentle but probing. The question hung in the air, and Victoria felt a lump form in her throat. Yes, she admitted, the word escaping her lips like a secret. I thought I'd moved on, but, love never truly leaves you, does it? It lingers, like a shadow, reminding us of what we've lost, Samuel said, his tone thoughtful. You remind me of her. Victoria's heart raced. Who? He smiled knowingly, and Victoria felt as if he could see straight into her soul. The girl who loved and lost. The girl who became a woman but still carried the weight of her past. As the conversation flowed, Victoria couldn't shake off the sense that Samuel was more than just a stranger she had saved. There was a connection, a thread that linked her past to this moment. She recalled the painting she had seen in his apartment and the haunting resemblance it bore to her younger self. Samuel, she began, her voice steady, I saw a portrait in your apartment. It looked just like me, but I don't understand why it was there. Do you know anything about it? His gaze deepened, and a flicker of recognition danced in his eyes. Ah yes, that painting. It was a gift from my grandson, Daniel. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Daniel? You're his grandfather? Yes, I am. We were very close. In fact, he's been searching for you for many years. Samuel's voice softened. I think you were the great love of his life. Victoria felt her heart race, a mixture of disbelief and excitement coursing through her veins. But why hasn't he found me? Life has a way of complicating things, Samuel replied. Misunderstandings, distance, and time. They can cloud the heart. But Daniel never stopped thinking about you. He believed you were out there, somewhere. Why didn't he ever come back to find me? Victoria's voice trembled with emotion. The memories of their young love flooded back. Long summer days spent laughing, whispering dreams, and the night they parted. He thought you had moved on, Samuel said, his expression somber. He didn't want to disrupt your life. But in his heart, he always carried you. Victoria's heart ached at the thought. I never stopped loving him either, she confessed, tears brimming in her eyes. I thought he was gone for good after that night. Sometimes it takes a fire to light the way back home, Samuel said softly, reaching out to squeeze her hand gently. You must go find him, Victoria. You owe it to yourselves. Late that night, after her visit with Samuel, Victoria returned to her small apartment, her mind racing with thoughts of Daniel. The city lights twinkled outside her window, but they did little to illuminate the shadows that crept into her heart. She felt a pull, a desire to delve deeper into her past, to find the remnants of a love that had once filled her with joy and hope. As she rummaged through her belongings, she stumbled upon an old box tucked away in the corner of her closet. Dust motes danced in the air as she opened it, revealing a treasure trove of memories, letters, photographs, and trinkets from her relationship with Daniel. Each item seemed to whisper his name, echoing the laughter they had shared and the dreams they had woven together. Her fingers trembled as she picked up a faded photograph of them at the beach, sun-kissed and carefree. They were young, exuberant, and in love. Victoria could almost hear Daniel's laughter, feel the warmth of the sun on her skin, and taste the saltwater breeze that had carried their whispered promises. She turned to the letters, and as she began to read, the words pulled her back in time. "My dearest Victoria," one letter began, "I can't wait for the summer when we can be together again. You're everything to me." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she read on, each letter a testament to their love, their dreams, and the bond they had shared. "If only you could see how much I think about you," another letter expressed. "Every moment apart feels like an eternity." It was a bittersweet reminder of what they had lost, a love that had been so vibrant and full of promise, now resting in the past. As she sifted through the letters, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Victoria wiped her tears and took a deep breath. She had to find Daniel. She had to confront the space that time and misunderstanding had created between them. The thought filled her with both excitement and dread, but she knew one thing for certain. She could no longer ignore the love that had shaped her life, the love that had endured even through the silence. With newfound determination, she resolved to uncover the truth about Daniel's life, to bridge the gap that had separated them for far too long. The journey would be daunting, but as she closed the box and placed it back in the closet, she felt a spark within her, igniting a fire that had lain dormant for years. Victoria Hayes was ready to reclaim her past and, perhaps, rediscover the love that had never truly left her heart. Victoria stood in the bustling hospital corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as she made her way back to Samuel's room. The air was thick with antiseptic and the faint sounds of medical machinery, reminding her of the fragility of life. She clutched a small bouquet of flowers, lilies and daisies, bright and hopeful. But her heart felt heavy with questions that swirled in her mind like the smoke from the fire she had witnessed just days ago. Pushing the door open, she found Samuel propped up in bed, his frail body wrapped in crisp white sheets. His eyes, though dimmed by age, sparkled with warmth as he saw her. "Ah, Victoria, you've come back," he exclaimed, his voice gravelly yet filled with a hint of delight. "Of course, Samuel. I wanted to see how you were doing," she replied, setting the flowers on the bedside table. "How's the pain?" "Better, much better. They've got me on some good medication," he chuckled softly, then his expression shifted. "But I'm more interested in what's been going on in your life." Victoria smiled, but her mind lingered on the portrait she had seen in his apartment. "You mentioned Daniel last time we spoke. Can you tell me more about him?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor of anticipation within. Samuel's gaze turned thoughtful. Daniel was a good boy, full of dreams. He loved art, always had a sketchbook in hand, drawing everything he saw, he reminisced, a faint smile creeping onto his lips. "He painted that portrait of you, you know? He said you were his muse." Victoria's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the painting. "He painted me? I didn't know that," she stammered, trying to process the intimacy of that revelation. "What was he like? After we lost touch?" Samuel sighed, the weight of memories pressing upon him. "He was lost, I think. When you two broke up, it shattered him. He believed he had lost the best part of himself," he said, his voice laced with melancholy. "He searched for you, Victoria, for years. I often wondered if he would ever find that lost piece." "Search for me?" She could hardly believe it. Why didn't he just contact me? Why did we never talk again? The regret surged within her, a bitter taste on her tongue. "It was complicated," Samuel replied, his eyes narrowing slightly. "There was a misunderstanding, and he thought you had moved on. He didn't want to intrude upon your new life. He was proud, too proud to ask for help or to reach out." Victoria felt a pang of sorrow for Daniel, realizing how their choices had shaped their lives. "I never wanted him to think I had moved on. I thought he didn't want me anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. Samuel reached out, placing a weathered hand over hers. "You both were young, and emotions can cloud judgment, but I could see how much he cared. Even in the darkest of times, he spoke of you." "What do you mean?" she pressed, needing to know more, to unravel the tangled threads of their past. "There were letters," Samuel said, his voice low and conspiratorial. He would write to you, but never send them. He kept them all, hidden away. I wish I had known how to help him, but he was so stubborn. Letters? Victoria's heart raced at the thought. Where are they? Can I see them? Samuel hesitated, his expression tightening. I'm afraid they were lost. After the accident, the house was a wreck, and many things were thrown away in the chaos. But I remember some of the things he wrote, how he felt. What did he say? She urged, desperate for a connection to Daniel, for a piece of him that had been locked away for far too long. He wrote about the love he had for you, how he felt incomplete without you. He even said that he dreamed of the day you would meet again, Samuel recounted, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He believed that love could conquer time and distance. The words pierced through Victoria's heart, a bittersweet reminder of the love they once shared. Did he ever find anyone else? Did he move on? She asked, fearing the answer. Samuel shook his head slowly. No, he never did. He dated a few people, but it was never serious. He always compared them to you. You were his first and only love, Victoria. A silence enveloped the room, heavy with nostalgia and unexpressed feelings. Victoria felt the weight of the past settling on her shoulders, and she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Do you think he still thinks about me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Even if he's moved on in life, I think a part of him always holds on to you. It's a love that doesn't fade, Samuel said softly, his gaze steady and reassuring. Victoria nodded, her mind racing. She needed to find Daniel, to understand the choices they both made, and to see if the love they once had could still exist. Can you tell me where he might be? I have to find him, she said, determination filling her voice. Samuel looked at her, his expression a mix of concern and understanding. I wish I could give you a clear answer, but it's been so long. He moved away after everything happened. I believe he went to New York for a time, but after that, I lost track of him. New York, she murmured, her thoughts turning over like pages in a book. He could still be there. I have to try. As she stood to leave, Samuel grabbed her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. Promise me you'll be careful, Victoria. The past can be a tricky thing to navigate. I promise, Samuel. I'll be careful, she replied, her voice steady. Thank you for sharing this with me. I feel like I'm finally understanding things I've carried for so long. After saying her goodbyes and stepping into the cool air outside, Victoria felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. Hope, regret, and a determination to reconnect with the man who had captured her heart so many years ago. As she walked down the street, her mind raced, crafting plans and possibilities. That evening, she sat on her couch, surrounded by the remnants of her life, the city lights casting a soft glow through her window. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the brink of something monumental. With each passing moment, the idea of finding Daniel became more than just a distant dream. It became her mission. She pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys as she searched through old contacts and mutual friends, any lead that could guide her to Daniel. The glow of the screen illuminated her face, reflecting her resolve. The past was calling her, and she was ready to answer, ready to face whatever awaited her in the journey ahead. In her heart, she held on to the hope that love, once lost, could be found again. Victoria Hayes paced her modern office, the skyline of Manhattan glimmering through the expansive windows. The adrenaline from the successful deal still coursed through her veins, but the lingering sense of purpose ignited by her encounter with Samuel Mitchell refocused her thoughts. She needed to find Daniel. The realization settled heavily in her chest, an urgent call to action that she couldn't ignore. As she settled into her chair, Victoria flicked on her laptop, the screen illuminating her determined expression. Her fingers danced over the keyboard as she began compiling a list of mutual friends. Each name sparked a memory, each connection a potential lifeline to Daniel. She had lost so much time, but she was determined to reclaim what was hers. Hey, Vic, a voice chimed from the doorway, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Melissa, her ambitious colleague, with a knowing smirk. You look like you're plotting world domination, or just another corporate takeover. Actually, I'm trying to track down an old friend, Victoria replied, her tone clipped. She didn't have time for distractions. An old friend? Or an old flame? Melissa leaned against the doorframe. Her interest piqued. You know, I heard from Mark that you pulled some crazy stunt during that fire. Very heroic of you. Thanks, Victoria replied tersely, suppressing the rush of annoyance. She could sense the underlying jealousy. Melissa had always been competitive, and it was clear she felt threatened by Victoria's recent distraction. Just be careful. You know how people can twist stories. You don't want to end up as the headline in tomorrow's gossip column, Melissa warned, her tone laced with faux concern. Victoria resisted the urge to roll her eyes. I appreciate the concern, but I can handle my own narrative. With that, she turned her focus back to the screen, ignoring the way Melissa's eyes narrowed, her expression souring at the lack of acknowledgement. Hours slipped away as Victoria reached out to everyone she could think of, friends from college, acquaintances from the investment world, and even distant relatives. She combed through social media, her heart racing with each response. Some were vague and unhelpful, while others ignited a spark of hope. Victoria, I have something. Her assistant, Leo, burst into her office, holding a crumpled note. One of your old friends from college reached out. They said they think they know where Daniel might be. Victoria's heart leapt. What do you mean? Where? They mentioned a small town in Texas. They said he's been living there for a while now. Leo's eyes glittered with excitement. It's not much, but it's something. Texas? Victoria echoed, her mind racing with possibilities. I need to know more. Do we have a name? Yeah, let me check my messages. Leo rifled through his phone, his brow furrowing in concentration. Ah, here it is. A guy named Mike. He was Daniel's roommate back in college. Victoria's fingers drummed against her desk as Leo continued. He also mentioned that Daniel has been taking care of some family matters for quite some time. They got closer after you. Well, you know. A heaviness settled in her stomach as she thought of the pain of their past. Can you set up a call with him? I need to speak with him directly. On it, Leo said, and Victoria watched with a mix of anticipation and anxiety as he left her office. As the hours passed, Victoria's excitement turned to impatience. She had pored over every detail of Daniel's life she could remember, every moment they had shared, and all the reasons they had lost touch. But now, with a potential lead, she felt an urgency she hadn't experienced in years. Victoria, you're on with Mike, Leo announced, excitement bubbling in his voice. Thanks, Leo. Victoria straightened in her chair, her heart racing as she picked up the phone. Hi, Mike. This is Victoria Hayes. Victoria. Wow, it's been ages, Mike replied, his voice warm and friendly. I heard you were looking for Daniel. Yes, I am. I know this might seem sudden, but I need to find him. Can you tell me where he is? Sure. It's been a while since I last saw him, but I think he's in a small town called Silver Creek. He's been laying low, dealing with some personal stuff. Victoria felt a rush of relief mixed with apprehension. Do you know how I can get in touch with him? Last I heard, he was working at a local hardware store. It's a bit off the beaten path, but I can give you the number if you'd like. Yes, please. That would be great. She scribbled down the number, her mind racing with the possibilities of finally reconnecting. As they continued to talk, Mike shared stories of their college days, tales that danced through her memory like flickering flames. She laughed at the antics they had gotten into, but each laugh also reminded her of how much time had passed, of how much had changed. Just be careful, okay? Daniel's had a tough time since you two, well, you know, Mike cautioned, his tone shifting to concern. I understand, Victoria said, her heart heavy. I just need to know what happened. I need to know if he's okay. Good luck, Vic. I hope you find what you're looking for. After they hung up, the weight of her next steps settled over her. Reaching out to Daniel after all these years felt monumental. Would he want to see her? Would he still feel anything for her? Later that evening, she sat alone in her apartment, the city bustling below her. The skyline, once a symbol of her ambition and success, felt more like a cage. She opened her laptop again, staring at the empty document as doubt crept in. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Leo. Asterisk, you sure you want to do this? What if he's moved on? Asterisk Victoria took a deep breath, her fingers hovering over the keys. What if? She whispered to herself. What if he hasn't? Determination surged through her. She wouldn't let fear dictate her life any longer. The next morning, she booked a flight to Texas. The excitement buzzed in her veins like electricity. She was ready to face whatever came next, to confront the uncertainties of her past, and to reclaim the love she had lost. However, just as she was packing her bag, her phone rang. It was a call from Melissa. Hey Vic, just wanted to check in. Heard you were heading to Texas. Everything okay? Melissa's voice had a syrupy sweetness that grated on Victoria's nerves. Everything's fine, Victoria replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. Just taking care of some personal matters. Right. Personal matters, Melissa echoed, a hint of skepticism in her tone. Well, if you need anything while you're down there, I won't, Victoria interrupted, her temper flaring. I appreciate the offer, but I can handle this on my own. Suit yourself. Just remember that the corporate world is cutthroat. You don't want to come back with your tail between your legs, Melissa warned, her voice dripping with condescension. Thanks for the reminder, Victoria said dryly before hanging up. In that moment, she felt a surge of clarity. She wasn't just heading to Texas to find Daniel. She was heading to reclaim her narrative, to confront the ghosts of her past and the shadows of her present. As she zipped her suitcase, a sense of calm washed over her. She was no longer the young woman who had lost her first love. She was a force to be reckoned with, ready to face whatever awaited her in Silver Creek. With a final glance at the skyline, she stepped out of her apartment, her heart pounding with anticipation for the journey ahead. This was her moment, and she was ready to embrace it. Victoria Hayes stood at the edge of a small town in Texas, her heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the tidy houses and dusty roads. It felt surreal to be so far from the bustling life of Manhattan, where skyscrapers loomed and life raced by at a relentless pace. Here, everything was quaint, almost like a scene from a movie, and as she took a deep breath, she could almost smell the nostalgia in the air. She had arrived in this town with a singular purpose: to find Daniel Mitchell, the love she had lost so many years ago. The journey had been long and fraught with emotional turbulence, but now that she was finally here, the weight of her mission felt heavier than ever. She pulled her phone from her pocket, checking the address she had scribbled down from the letter Daniel's childhood friend had sent her. It was an old, modest house on the outskirts of town, and with every step she took towards it, her heart raced faster. As she knocked on the door, her mind flooded with memories of Daniel, his laughter, his dreams, and the way he used to look at her as if she were the only person in the world. What would he be like now? Would he still be the same boy she fell in love with? Or had the years transformed him into someone unrecognizable? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but there was no turning back now. The door creaked open, and an elderly woman stood before her, her hair silver and her eyes bright with curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice warm but cautious. "Hi, I'm Victoria Hayes," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'm looking for Daniel Mitchell. Is he here?" The woman's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing her features. "Daniel? He's not here at the moment. But come in, dear. You must be cold out there." She stepped aside, allowing Victoria to enter the cozy living room filled with photographs and memories. As Victoria stepped inside, the warmth enveloped her like a comforting blanket. The walls were adorned with family photos, and amidst them, she spotted a familiar face. Daniel, smiling broadly at a summer picnic, his arm around a young girl who looked like she could be his sister. It struck her how time had a way of binding people together through memories, even as it pulled them apart. "Have a seat," the woman said, gesturing towards a plush armchair. "I'm Maureen, Daniel's grandmother. What brings you to our little town?" Victoria hesitated for a moment, trying to find the right words. I knew Daniel a long time ago. We were very close before, well, things happened." Her voice trailed off, the unspoken memories hanging in the air between them. Maureen's expression softened. "Ah, the one he always talked about. I remember him being heartbroken when you two lost touch. He never quite got over you, you know? Victoria's heart ached at the revelation. Did he ever mention what happened? Why we lost each other? Maureen nodded, settling into her chair. Oh, he talked about it all the time. There was a misunderstanding, a terrible one. He thought you had moved on, that you didn't want to be with him anymore. It broke his heart. Victoria felt a rush of emotions, regret, sorrow, and a glimmer of hope. I never stopped loving him, Maureen. I thought he had vanished from my life forever. Daniel has always been a stubborn boy, Maureen said with a hint of fondness in her tone. He never believed it was possible for you to still care. He's carried that weight with him for years, always searching, always hoping. As they talked, Maureen shared more about Daniel's life after their separation. He had moved around a lot, never quite settling, always caught between the past and his future. He had tried to find Victoria, reaching out to old friends, but the answers were elusive, and as time passed, the ache of their lost love had turned into a dull pain he carried silently. I wish I could tell him that I'm here, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. I want him to know that I never stopped thinking about him. Maureen smiled gently, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. You might just have your chance. Daniel is back in town for a few days. He needed to clear his head, but he's been avoiding everyone. He's been through quite a lot, but I think he needs to hear your side of the story. Victoria's heart leapt at the thought. Do you think he would want to see me? Dear, if he still has any of that fire in him, he will want to see you. Just be patient with him. He's still trying to navigate the weight of his past. The conversation flowed naturally, and with each shared story, Victoria felt a connection to Daniel rekindling, as if the strands of their lives were weaving together once more. Maureen shared tales of Daniel's childhood, his dreams of becoming an artist, and how he had once painted a mural in town that captured the beauty of their community. Art was his first love, Maureen said, her voice laced with pride. He poured his heart into it, just like he did with everything else. But when you left, it was like a piece of him went missing. Victoria swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Maureen's words. I wish I had known. I wish I could have told him that I loved him. Then go find him, Maureen urged, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. You have the chance to make things right. Don't let fear hold you back. With a newfound determination, Victoria rose from her chair. Where can I find him? Maureen smiled knowingly. He often walks to the old park near the river. It's a place he used to escape to when he needed to think. You might just find him there. Victoria thanked Maureen and stepped out of the house, her heart racing with anticipation. She walked briskly towards the park, the evening air cool against her skin. As she approached the riverbank, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Her mind raced with thoughts of what she would say to Daniel, how she would explain the years lost between them. Would he be angry? Would he still feel the same? She shook her head, trying to push the doubts away. This was her chance. She had to seize it. As she reached the park, she spotted a figure sitting on a bench, staring out over the water. The familiar silhouette sent her heart racing. It was him, Daniel. After all these years, he was finally within her reach. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel? He turned, and their eyes met. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The world around them faded away, and all that existed was the connection they once shared. The pain, the longing, and the love. Everything came rushing back in a tidal wave. Victoria, he breathed. Disbelief etched across his face. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that could change everything. Victoria stood before the small, weathered house, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Memories flooded back as she gazed at the familiar structure, each detail pulling her deeper into the past. The peeling paint, the crooked fence, even the way the sunlight cast shadows on the front porch brought her back to the days when she and Daniel shared laughter and dreams. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet the emotions were as vivid as ever. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on the door, each rap resonating with her hopes and fears. Moments stretched out like an eternity before the door creaked open. A woman stood there, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. Her hair was a tangled mess of curls, and her eyes held a hint of recognition. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, tilting her head slightly, studying Victoria. I'm looking for Daniel Mitchell," Victoria stammered, feeling the weight of her own words. I used to know him a long time ago." The woman's eyes darkened for a moment, a flicker of something that could have been pity or perhaps even regret passing through her gaze. "Daniel's not here right now," she said slowly. He's married." Victoria felt her heart sink. "Married?" she echoed, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. Her mind raced with scenarios, each one more painful than the last. Had he moved on without her? Did he even remember her? "I see," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can you tell me more about him?" The woman hesitated, as if weighing her options. "I suppose I can," she finally said, stepping aside to allow Victoria to enter. "But it's not the fairy tale you might be hoping for." Stepping into the modest living room, Victoria was struck by how little had changed. The faded floral wallpaper, the worn-out sofa, everything seemed to echo her memories. She could almost hear Daniel's laughter bouncing off the walls. "Please, have a seat," the woman said, gesturing toward the sofa. "I'm Lydia, by the way." "Victoria," she replied softly, taking a seat, her heart racing. She felt like a ghost haunting a place she once belonged. Lydia sat down across from her, folding her hands in her lap. "Daniel and I grew up together. We were best friends, but after a family tragedy, things changed." Her voice trembled slightly, and Victoria could see the pain lurking behind her eyes. "He needed someone, anyone, to help him cope. I was there, and we got married." Victoria's heart ached at the revelation. "But did he ever stop loving me?" she asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Lydia looked down, her expression pained. "He still talks about you, you know? He never really let you go. Even after everything, you've always been in his heart." Victoria felt a surge of hope mixed with despair. "So he still thinks about me? After all this time?" Lydia nodded slowly. "Yes, he does. But he feels trapped. Our marriage was born out of obligation, not love. He's always felt like he had to take care of me because of what happened. He never wanted to hurt me, but he never got over you either." Victoria's mind was racing. "Where is he now?" "He lives in a small apartment in the city," Lydia replied, her voice softening. "I can give you his address if you want, but I must warn you, he's not the same person you remember." "I don't care," Victoria said, determination flooding her voice. "I have to see him. I need to know if there's still something between us." Lydia hesitated, then nodded, reaching for a notepad on the coffee table. She scribbled down the address, her brow furrowed in thought. "Just be careful, Victoria. Emotions are complicated, and you might not find what you're looking for." Victoria took the slip of paper, her fingers trembling. "Thank you, Lydia. I appreciate your honesty." As she stood to leave, Lydia's voice stopped her. "Wait. Before you go, I want you to know, I'm not trying to come between you two. I just want Daniel to be happy. If you can give him that, then I'll support it." "Thank you," Victoria whispered, her heart swelling with gratitude. With one last glance around the room, she walked out the door, her mind racing with possibilities. The drive to Daniel's apartment felt surreal, each street she passed igniting memories of their young love. She recalled their late-night talks, their secret dreams, and the way they would hold hands as if the world outside could never touch them. The weight of nostalgia was heavy as she navigated through the city streets, her heart pounding with anticipation. Finally, she arrived at the apartment building, a modest structure that seemed to blend into the surroundings. Her breath caught in her throat as she parked and stepped out of the car. The air was thick with tension, and she felt a mix of excitement and fear coursing through her veins. As she ascended the stairs to the second floor, her mind raced with what she would say. Would he recognize her? Would he still feel the same? She reached his door, her hand hovering above the knocker for a moment, hesitation washing over her. With a deep breath, she knocked, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. Time seemed to stretch as she waited, her heart drumming in her chest. Finally, the door creaked open, and there stood Daniel, looking older yet still undeniably him. His hair was tousled, and the stubble on his jaw gave him a rugged charm that made her breath hitch. "Victoria," he breathed, disbelief flooding his voice. "Daniel," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, they stood frozen, staring at each other as if the years had melted away. The silence was thick with unspoken words, emotions swirling around them. "Is it really you?" he finally asked, disbelief etched across his features. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I found you." He took a step closer, his expression shifting from shock to something deeper. "I can't believe it. I've thought about you every day." "Me too," she replied, her voice trembling. "I never stopped loving you." Daniel's eyes softened, and for the first time in years, she saw the spark of hope flicker in his gaze. "But I'm married, Victoria. I don't want to hurt Lydia." "I know," she said quickly, "but I had to see you. I had to know if there was still a chance for us." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. "It's complicated." "I know," she said, stepping closer, "but we can figure it out together. I never wanted to lose you, Daniel. I thought I had to move on, but I couldn't. Not really." They stood there in the doorway, the weight of their shared past hanging heavy in the air. The world outside faded away, and in that moment, it was just the two of them. Two souls connected by a love that had never truly faded. "Come in," he finally said, his voice low and hesitant. "We need to talk." As she stepped over the threshold, Victoria felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was the moment they had both been waiting for. The chance to confront their past, to heal the wounds that had kept them apart for so long. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but as she looked into his eyes, she knew they would face it together. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story about overcoming challenges and family love, don't forget to like the video, comment on what touched you the most, and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for our next exciting story.